Welcome to Football Game Plan's FCS Kickoff, presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, and with the playoff field finally settled, there's still a lot to talk about as we dive into Week 13 of the FCS. Like I mentioned in the open, there's a litany of things to talk about this week, and here's what we have on tap for this episode. We'll dive into the field of 24 as we break down the FCS playoff field, and one of the best rivalries in college football takes place this weekend in my hometown of New Orleans, Louisiana, as the 43rd Bayou Classic between Southern University and Grambling State meet up in the Louisiana Superdome. We'll talk about the history and the pageantry in our tradition segment. And seeing that it's Thanksgiving weekend, we'll share with you the top 10 things we like about the FCS and what we're thankful for this season in the football championship subdivision. But first, let's jump into our 4-minute offense and take a look at some of the top storylines this week in the FCS. The Presbyterian Blue Holes will be looking for a new head coach this offseason as Harold Nichols resigned a couple of days ago, when Coach Nichols was a Blue Holes guy through and through. He played quarterback there from 1987 to 1989, and he got his coaching start there as an assistant back in 1990. He was a head man in charge from 2009 to 2016, where he compiled a 21-67 record with only one winning season coming in 2014, where he went 6-5. Going into last weekend, there was a chance for a three-way tie in the Ivy League between Harvard, Princeton, and Penn. Well, that's why we play the games, right? Yale upset the Crimson in their annual rivalry game, and Princeton had to fight back and battle back against Dartmouth to get the victory, and Penn made easy work of the Cornell Big Red. So at the end of a wild Saturday, we have a two-way tie for the 2016 Ivy Championship between the Quakers and the Tigers. And you have to love the fact that the conference races were decided on the final weekend. And neither Austin Peay nor Delaware State could pull off the victory last week and finish the 2016 season winless. The Governors held a 13-0 lead over the Kentucky Wildcats into the second quarter, but ultimately ended up losing the game 49-13. And Delaware State dropped a close one to Howard on the road, 26-21. Now, both teams were young and competitive throughout the season, which should bode well for their 2017 campaign. A huge blow to the Richmond Spiders' title hopes as quarterback Kyle Loletta was lost last week in their loss to William & Mary. It's highly unlikely that he'll play this game versus North Carolina A&T, which leaves quarterbacks David Broadus and Jake Calise as the two healthy options left on the roster. Now, the loss of Loletta will make things very interesting this weekend at E. Claiborne Robins Stadium. Let's take a look back and hand out some Player of the Week awards. Our Offensive Player of the Week award goes to William & Mary running back Kendall Anderson, who rushed for 219 yards on 42 carries as the Tribe upset Richmond 34-13. Anderson also scored 2 rushing touchdowns and caught 4 passes for 42 yards. Defensive Player of the Week award goes to the University of San Diego defensive lineman Jonathan Peterson, who paved the way for the Toreros with 5 TFLs, 3 sacks, and 1 quarterback hurry as the Toreros went on to rout Campbell 57-21 to win the Pioneer League crown outright. And finally, our Special Teams Player of the Week honor goes to Houston Baptist kicker Alex Chadwick, who nailed all of his extra points. He went 2 for 2 in that category and also went 2 out of 3 on his field goal attempts, hitting a long one of 60 yards. With a leg like that, you can definitely consider him a legit offensive weapon for the Huskies. And we'll be back after this.
New York City is the largest market for broadcast media. It's the epicenter for the TV and radio industry. If you ever had a dream of working in the thrilling broadcast world, then make it a reality by going to the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. CSB has helped numerous people get a job with hands-on training and a learn-by-doing mentality. You will learn all of the high-tech equipment in the TV and radio studios. From hosting your own radio show to being a news or sports anchor, operating a camera in the TV studio, or editing audio and video, the choice is yours. Graduates from CSB have gone on to work at some of the major companies in the industry. To get more information, call 1-800-TV-RADIO or check us out at gocsb.com. Your road to success starts here at the Connecticut School of Broadcasting.
What's up, FCS fans? I'm Ray Ryan with your first round playoff preview of Big South champs Charleston Southern traveling upstate to Wofford College, who are an at-large selection from the Southern Conference. I'm pumped for this one because it's really amazing how similar these two teams are. Both squads have explosive option running games, as the Buccaneers have 5 players with over 200 rushing yards and are led by senior running back Mike Holloway's 95 yards a game. On the other hand, the Terriers have 4 ball carriers with 230 plus yards on the ground and feature senior fullback Lorenzo Long, who has 14 scores. That being said, both schools can dominate the line of scrimmage on defense as well. CSU only gives up an average of 134 rushing yards, while Wofford holds opponents to just 68. And when speaking about their individual defensive players, I see more mirror images. Both units have a D lineman that can get to the quarterback in Anthony Ellis for Charleston Southern with 7 sacks and 13.5 tackles for a loss, while Tyler Vaughn has also dropped 7 QBs and has picked up 14 TFLs for the Terriers. There are playmaking linebackers who lead the teams in tackles as well, with Solomon Brown and Datavius Wilson. And lastly, there are ball hawks in both secondaries. Troy McGowan has 4 INTs for the Bucks, while Jaleel Green has 5 for the Terriers. Both CSU and Wofford have been battle-tested too. Charleston lost an overtime heartbreaker at number 1 North Dakota State, but they also defeated 15th-ranked Coastal Carolina and 2 teams that have received top 25 votes in Liberty and Kennesaw State. The Terriers' schedule is no cakewalk though either. They dropped 2 nail-biters to playoff teams in Sanford and the Citadel, while also picking up an impressive road win at number 9 Chattanooga. And the last major similarity I see is that both schools have had to overcome the adversity of losing their starting quarterback early in the season. Terriers' backup QB Brandon Goodson has stepped in and been effective, facilitating the run game and in picking up almost 30 yards per week. CSU signal caller Shane Buchanel has run for 35 yards a game himself, while also throwing for 126 and 14 TDs. Couple that with the fact that Wofford allows 201 passing yards per game, and that's why I think Charleston can have success through the air. It's a big play threat, Cameron Brown. I also feel that the Bucks have an advantage in the mental game against the Terriers. Charleston has playoff experience from last year when they picked up a win to advance to the quarterfinals, whereas Wofford is making their first tournament appearance since 2012. CSU should be playing with a chip on their shoulder too after winning their conference, but still having to go on the road to face their interstate rival, who's an at-large selection. For those reasons, I think Charleston Southern will win a tight game and advance to the second round, where they'll face another South Carolina team in a rematch from last year's playoffs, the Citadel. For Football Game Plan's FCS Kickoff, I'm Ray Ryan.
Even though the FCS playoffs start this week, there are still a few other games on the FCS Week 13 schedule, and we'll break down all 3 for you right here. And we'll start down in Conway, South Carolina, as the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers play host to the Hampton Pirates.
The Pirates have 2 tremendous playmakers in this ball game, and running back Yaki Johnson and wide receiver Rashawn Proctor. The issue will be finding the offensive consistency to sustain drives and excel in the red zone. Now, Coastal Carolina is looking to cap off its FCS stint with their 7th straight victory on the season. Now, running back D'Angelo Henderson is already over 1,000 yards, and their defense has been extremely stingy throughout this winning streak. Now, don't look for the Chanticleers to be in a giving mood during this holiday weekend. I like Coastal. It's the 43rd edition of the Bayou Classic between Southern and Grambling, and let's break down this matchup even further with some keys to victory or coaching points for both teams in this ball game. For Southern, I think their defensive line has to be able to win up front versus Grambling. They're going to have to get pressure on Devontae Kincaid. They're going to have to slow down this ground game. If their defensive line, which has been an issue throughout the course of the season, can't step up, they could struggle. And offensively, I think Southern has to play the tempo game. I think they can utilize their own offense as their best defense in this ball game. They want to keep that aggressive Grambling State front seven off balance by playing up-tempo, no huddle, push the pace, push the tempo. I think they can have a chance. And also, it goes without saying, when you have a guy of the caliber of Willie Quinn, it's important to play great special teams. I think that has been the biggest X factor in this season for Southern. Their special teams play on both sides. Also, their kicking game has been outstanding. So if they can play winning special teams, then they only have to win one other facet of the game, and they can come away victorious. And for Grambling in this ball game, team defense in the passing game is going to be huge. We just talked about Willie Quinn and the impact he has on the special teams unit, but he's also their leading receiver in this ball game. And if they can't corral him and get team defense over there to bring him on the ground, he can slip one tackle and take it the distance. Also, offensively, they can't be afraid to go big on offense. If they don't want to make this an aerial assault type of a Bayou Classic, if they don't want to make this an Austin Howard versus Devontae Kincaid type game, they can't be afraid to line up and run the football downhill. I think they can have some success against this Jaguars defense in the run game department. I think this is where the Grambling Tigers can exploit Southern defensively. And also, they have to keep their foot on the gas. If they get a lead, they have to keep a lead and then sustain that lead. When you look at what they do well, they're able to score quickly. They're able to score in bunches. And if history is of any indication, somebody's going to blow a lead in the Bayou Classic. So if they have a lead, they have to make sure they keep their foot on the gas, keep their goal in mind, because they are trying to make the Celebration Bowl. Now let's take a look at some X factors in this ball game, starting with the Southern Jaguars. I'll look at linebacker Aaron Tiller at 6'1", 256. The junior backer is their pressure player. He's a guy that can do a great job in applying pressure on Devontae Kincaid in that passing game. If they can put Grambling in backed up situations, I think that's a win for this Jaguars defense. And for Grambling in this contest, I'll look at their linebacker, their outstanding senior linebacker. There's Arquez Cooper, 6'3", 225. When you look at what he brings to the table, he's their run defender. He's a guy that does a great job in space, 30-plus solo tackles, 11 TFL, so he's able to make plays at or behind the line of scrimmage, also in coverage. So he's going to have to excel because they're facing a very good running back, the best running back in the Southwestern Athletic Conference, in Leonard Tillery. So if they can make Southern one-dimensional, I think it bodes well for Grambling's chances. I like Grambling in this ball game. I think this is a well-focused team, a balanced team on both sides of the ball. They're strong defensively. They're great offensively. And I think they remember what happened last year in this ball game and also in the SWAC championship game. They want to make sure they take care of business versus Southern, go on to Houston, take care of business there, and then make their trip to the Celebration Bowl in Atlanta. So this is a focused football team, a well-coached football team, and I do think they'll take care of business versus their hated rival, the Southern Jaguars.
And only 4 teams remain for the Colonial Athletic Association in the FCS playoffs. The 10-1 James Madison Dukes, 8-3 Villanova Wildcats, the 8-3 Richmond Spiders, and the 7-4 New Hampshire Wildcats were all able to secure playoff spots this year. New Hampshire was able to secure a home playoff meeting with the Patriot League champion Lehigh Mountain Hawks. New Hampshire was able to retain the Bryce Crowell Musket Trophy in their rivalry matchup against Maine. Their kicker, Morgan Ellman, drilled a 22-yard game-winning field goal with 7 seconds left to get past the Black Bears by a score of 24-21. If it weren't for senior running back Dalton Croson with his 163 yards and a touchdown, the Wildcats might be on the outside looking in. If the Wildcats play anything like their Week 11 performance against the UAlbany Great Danes, they will have a quick exit. This is going to be a tough matchup for the Cats. Next up, we have the Richmond Spiders, who will be taking on the North Carolina A&T Aggies at home in the first round. They come limping into the playoffs after dropping a clunker against the William and Mary Tribe by a score of 34-13. The Spiders have lost 2 out of their last 3 and allowed 213 yards and 2 touchdowns to the Tribe's senior running back, Kendall Anderson. They were also outscored 28-0 in the second half. Richmond was still the #1 passing offense this year in the CAA. They're going to have to get that offense back on track to have any chance against the Aggies. With their decisive 41-10 win over the UW Blue Hens, the Wildcats will be taking on the St. Francis Red Flash at home in what should be a fun game. In a game where their defense continued to dominate, sophomore quarterback Zach Bednarczyk was able to bounce back after his rough performance against JMU 2 weeks ago. He threw for 195 yards, rushed for 78, and threw 4 touchdowns. If this offense can take this performance into the playoffs with their top-ranked CAA defense, Coach Talley will be getting a win in the final home game of his career. And finally, we have the conference champs, the James Madison Dukes, who are the number 4 seed and were able to secure a bye in the first round. Even without star junior quarterback Brian Shore, the Dukes were able to take down the upstart Elon Phoenix 63-14. The Dukes piled on 699 yards of total offense, led by freshman quarterback Cole Johnson dominating through the air. He completed 12 of 13 passes for 274 yards and 2 touchdowns in his first start. Reports are saying that Shore will be able to come back, but that remains to be seen at this point. But if Johnson can play the way he did against Elon, then I think the Duke's top-ranked CAA offense will be just fine. They take on the winner of New Hampshire and Lehigh next Saturday. Good luck to all of the CAA teams this weekend in the playoffs.
For me, I think the biggest thing that football taught me was how to overcome adversity.
At some point in your life, you're going to have some tough times.
You have to have that next play mentality.
That cohesiveness and that working together, that's really something special that you can't get in a lot of other areas.
When you practice that and you live that in other phases of your life, it becomes second nature because all you know how to do is fight.
It's not an easy game. If it were easy, everyone would do it.
You start to appreciate the smaller contributions that people make. You don't just look at the big one because you knew it took 6 or 7 other guys who are unsung.
And you can't take shortcuts and be successful.
Doing what they do to make it possible for the guy getting the press clippings or whatever it might be.
In this game, whether it's as a coach or a player.
So I would certainly say that you definitely got a very quick lesson in how to overcome adversity playing football.
What's up, FCS fans? I'm Ray Ryan with your Ivy League report. The 10 weeks of Ancient 8 football have come and gone for the 2016 season, so let's recap how the teams finished out the year and who took home the Ivy title. In Providence, Columbia head coach Al Bagnoli said that he finally got a complete game from his Lions as they upset Brown 31-13. Junior QB Anders Hill had one of his most productive games of the year with 222 passing yards and 2 TDs to Josh Wainwright. Running back Allen Watson also added 158 yards on the ground to help Columbia take another step forward as a program and surpass their win total from last season. And in Ithaca, Penn was playing with a little bit more on the line as they had a chance for a share of the Ivy Championship with a victory over Cornell. Well, that pressure didn't faze them at all because they led the entire way and won easy over the Big Red, 42-20. The Quakers amassed 527 yards of total offense, highlighted by 2 rushing touchdowns apiece by Alec Torgerson and Trey Solomon. The defense was opportunistic as well, coming up with 3 interceptions, including Mason Williams' 6th of the year, to make it back-to-back titles for the Quakers. Harvard had a chance at Ivy glory as well, but their longtime rival Yale played the spoiler role to perfection. Bulldog signal caller Kurt Rawlings was effective on the ground and through the air, finding Reed Klubnik for a 3-yard TD late in the fourth quarter, which proved to be the game winner. It was a stunner in Cambridge as Yale ended its 9-game losing streak against the Crimson with a 21-14 victory to deny Harvard of their 4th straight league title. And as I cover the Dartmouth-Princeton game in person, you could feel the tension in the air as the Tigers also had a shot at the Ivy crown and were facing a team that they had never beaten under Coach Serace. Princeton trailed the Big Green 14-10 at halftime, but they really showed their toughness in the final 30 minutes. The defense came up with several key stops, and the Tigers' fast-paced offense was clicking on all cylinders, highlighted by John Lovett's school record-breaking 20th rushing touchdown of the season. And after Mark Fasati forced a fumble on the fourth quarter kick return to set up another Princeton score, Coach Serace and company could breathe easy. The Tigers would pull away in the final minutes to claim a 38-21 victory over Dartmouth and their 2nd Ivy championship in 4 years. So to recap the final league standings, Princeton and Penn sit at the top with 6-1 conference records. The Tigers were 8-2 overall and the Quakers 7-3. Harvard claimed third place with a 5-2 Ivy mark and 7-3 record, while Brown and Yale tied for fourth at 3-4. The Bears finished at 4-6 on the season, while the Bulldogs came in at 3-7. There was also a deadlock for sixth with Cornell and Columbia both holding 2-5 league records. The Big Red posted a 4-6 overall mark, while Columbia came in at 3-7. And rounding out the Ivy leaderboard is Dartmouth with a 1-6 conference record, but a 4-6 overall mark. Well, that'll do it for the Ivy League's football's 2016 season. I'm Ray Ryan, and I hope you've enjoyed another great year of the Ancient Eight.
Welcome back to the FCS Kickoff presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Before we take a look at the FCS playoff bracket, here are the top 8 seeds. Number 1, North Dakota State. Eastern Washington checks in at number 2, Jacksonville State at number 3. The James Madison Dukes of the CAA are at number 4. Number 1, Sam Houston State checks in at number 5. The Citadel are at the 6th spot, and North Dakota, the Fighting Hawks, checking at number 7. And rounding out the top 8 are the South Dakota State Jackrabbits. Now, all of these teams have byes for the first round, and I'm just shocked that the number 1 team in the country, Sam Houston State, isn't a number 1 seed, but who knows what goes on in those selection rooms and what types of justifications are being made while they're in there. But overall, this is a strong group right here, and I have no complaints with the 8 teams on this list. Now here's a look at the rest of the 2016 FCS playoff bracket. I absolutely love some of the first round matchups and possible second round battles, and we'll break down all 8 of these games this week later on in the show. Now obviously there are some teams that are feeling left out of the playoffs, and I feel as though there was 2 legit snubs in Fordham and Duquesne. Starting with the Rams, I think the committee is wrong for holding that one FCS loss against Monmouth against them. If you look at Monmouth at the time, they're a really good football team that also beat Lehigh, and they were 2-2 when they knocked off Fordham. Now this Rams team is one of the most dynamic in the FCS and boasts one of the best players in Chase Edmonds. Fordham was 8-3 on the season, 5-1 in the Patriot League as well, and I'm willing to bet that they found a way to keep them out because of the loss to Lehigh and how they lost to Lehigh. I think that may have contributed to them being excluded. Now, I'm not saying that is right, but I can see how they could use that loss against them. But it would be impossible for me to keep an 8-win team out of the playoffs. Now, Duquesne would be the other snub that I believe has a legitimate beef with the selection committee. The Dukes were their lone conference loss was against conference champ St. Francis, and the Dukes also won 8 games as well. Now, in my opinion, the loss to Kennesaw State isn't a bad loss, seeing that the Owls were an 8-win team themselves. Now, there's no doubt in the fact that the Duquesne Dukes were dominant in their victories, averaging 30 points a game in those wins, but I think this team would have been one of those surprise upsets in round 1 had they gotten into the tournament. I think when you look at 2 other teams in southeastern Louisiana and Albany, you can make strong cases for both of those squads as well. The Lions were hot coming down the stretch of the season. I think that Lamar loss hurt them, but a strong victory over McNeese, who's a perennial power, and a 7-4 finish, which included a 3-game winning streak, in my opinion, is a very strong pitch to the committee to put a hot team into the playoffs and just see what happens. Albany was a shock to many because of the Great Danes. They have an FBS victory on their schedule, on their resume versus Buffalo, and these victories over an FBS opponent usually weigh heavily when deciding who gets in and who stays out. Now, what killed the Great Danes, in my opinion, was their losing streak following their impressive 4-0 start. However, they did knock off New Hampshire and St. Francis, both of whom are playoff teams. Now, seeing there are a few more teams that are coming off good 2016 campaigns, I thought it would be cool to create some FCS bowl matchups with the teams that just missed the cut.
About 2 episodes ago, we floated out the idea that the FCS needed to create some bowl games to reward those teams that just missed the cut or those that had great seasons and did not make the playoffs for whatever reason. Our reasoning was that between the semifinal game and the national championship game, there's about a 2-week gap in the schedule where there's no FCS games being played. Now, this would be a prime slot for a series of FCS bowl games leading up to the title game on January 7th. Now, as you can see here, based off this season, Here's a few of the matchups that we would create to help fill that void in those 2 weeks. I think this is a great chance to create some matchups that we wouldn't normally see in the regular season, like Harvard versus Southern, UT Martin versus Princeton, Wagner versus Southeastern Louisiana. These will be some highly competitive games that'll keep the football championship subdivision in the minds of potential recruits and potential new fans to the FCS. It'll also not allow the FBS bowl games to completely take over the TV landscape during that time.
For the Missouri Valley Football Conference, I'm Brian Sullivan. As the playoffs start this week, there are 4 teams representing the conference. Co-conference winner North Dakota State is ranked number 1 and will have home field advantage throughout the playoffs and will have a bye this week. The other co-conference winner, South Dakota State, is ranked number 8 and will also have a bye this week. Illinois State and Youngstown State both received at-large bids and will play in round 1 this week. Starting off with Illinois State, who had won the last 4 out of 5 games, including 3 straight to end the season, traveled to Central Arkansas to take on the Bears, who had won 8 straight games before losing to Sam Houston State, which cost them the conference title and a bye. Illinois State offense led by hot quarterback Jake Colby, who threw for 9 touchdowns in his final 3 games, and his favorite target, NFL-ready wide receiver Anthony Warren, who had 5 touchdowns in those final 3 games, go up against a Bears defense that has just been outstanding this year, led by its heart and soul linebacker George Odom, who has 74 tackles and 8 tackles for losses. If the Redbirds quarterback Colby can't handle the pressure that the Bears will definitely bring, he may be playing the game on his back. Now on the flip side, the Bears will bring their high-powered offense led by quarterback Hayden Hildebrand, who has over 2,600 yards passing to go along with his 18 TDs, along with wide receiver Desmond Smith, who has 61 catches and 6 scores, against a Redbird defense anchored by linebacker Alejandro Rivera and his 88 tackles and 2 INTs, which held South Dakota State, who averaged 49 points a game, to only 21 in their win. My prediction is Central Arkansas to win 28-24. The game will be on ESPN3 Saturday at 3 p.m. Now to Youngstown State, who has a 14-game home playoff winning streak, hosts Sanford in a game of offense versus defense. Sanford will bring their 3rd-ranked FCS offense that averages 347.4 passing yards per game, led by quarterback Kelvin Hodges, who is 3rd in the FCS with over 3,700 yards passing and 33 touchdowns this year, and wide receiver Carl Hamilton, who has 14 TDs to go along with 1,200 receiving yards. They will have to face a scary Penguin Nation defense that is ranked 7th in yards allowed with 294.4 yards and has wreaked havoc all year in the conference, led by defensive end Avery Moss, who has 10 sacks and 42 tackles, and his partner in crime, NFL-ready defensive end Derek Rivers, and his 10 sacks and 37 tackles. These two will be a nightmare for Hodges, who should be pressured all day. Now, if Youngstown State's defense can contain Sanford's prolific passing attack and their offense, who put up 64 points against a very good Missouri State defense last time out, can keep their momentum going, Penguin Nation should celebrate their 15th straight home playoff victory. My prediction in this game is 28-14 Youngstown State. Now this game will air on ESPN3 at 5 p.m. Now finally, here are the playoff scenarios for next week. If Illinois State wins, they will travel to number 2 Eastern Washington. If Youngstown State wins, they will travel to number 3 Jacksonville State. Now number 8 South Dakota State, who had the bye this week, will face the winner of the Villanova-St. Francis game at the Jackrabbits. And finally, number 1 North Dakota State, who had the bye this week, will host the winner of Cal Poly San Diego game. Now with the playoffs kicking off, if you still haven't joined the revolution, just go under #FearTheFCS.
Southern and Grambling have played each other since 1932, and anytime they get together, it's always more than just a game.
Outside of the great football game that's being played between Grambling State and Southern University, the Bayou Classic, one of the other many festivities held in conjunction with this ball game, is a well-known, well-attended two-part Battle of the Bands where both universities' marching bands, Grambling's world-famed Tiger Marching Band and Southern's Human Jukebox, perform. Following the Greek show, the two renowned bands stage elaborately choreographed performances on the Friday night before the game. The second part is held during the football game's halftime show. Now, there's no official judge for the band event. Other festivities include a golf tournament, coaches luncheon, a concert festival, tailgating, fashion show, pep rally, alumni functions, college recruitment fair, and a Thanksgiving Day parade, which was brought back in 2011, and also a job fair for graduating students of both schools. An annual Grambling versus Southern Miss Bayou Classic beauty pageant was also held from 1976 to 2002. So again, needless to say, it's not just about the football game when these two historically black colleges and universities meet up for the Bayou Classic.
I think that the main reason to choose HBCU is for the family atmosphere. The guys are going to get the core values that their parents taught them, that their family members tried to raise them. You'll have a close-knit atmosphere. You'll actually have guys that care about you as a person. So I think that's the main reason for choosing the HBCU.
With all the latest in the Northeast Conference, presented by the FCS Kickoff Show, I'm Matt Chabatari. As the regular season has come and gone in the NEC, let's take a look at the final standings on the season. St. Francis finished at the top, clinching a share of the title with Duquesne and securing the conference's automatic bid to the FCS playoffs, courtesy of their 14-10 home win over Duquesne in October. Wagner, who lost to Duquesne earlier in November, sent St. Francis into the postseason with their first loss since September over the weekend, finishing just behind St. Francis and Duquesne at 4-2 in the conference. St. Francis hoped the loss was just a blip in the momentum they had built with their 7-game win streak prior to the loss. With all eyes on the playoffs here on the FCS Kickoff Show, let's look at who St. Francis are lining up against in their first weekend of the postseason and beyond potentially. The 7-4 St. Francis Red Flash will head across the state to take on the CAA at-large bid in the 8-3 Villanova Wildcats, who are ranked 9th nationally going into the playoffs. They are playing for a chance to take on FCS Powerhouse and the 8th-ranked team in South Dakota State next week, the only team to beat the number 1-ranked North Dakota State Bison in the regular season. As for St. Francis, they haven't fared as well on the road this season at 2-4 versus 5-0 at home. The Red Flash are attempting to become only the second team in the NEC to win a game in the FCS playoffs after Wagner did it in 2012 with a 31-20 win over Colgate. Looking across the field at Villanova, who are led by head coach Andy Talley, who has been at the helm for 32 seasons, could potentially be coaching his last game for the Wildcats program, as he has made it known he was stepping down after the season. Talley has had a legendary career with 12 postseason appearances, 6 in the last 9 seasons, where he made it to the national semifinals and won the national title in 2009. From a Red Flash team perspective, on offense, they're going to rely heavily on junior running back Marcus Bagley and sophomore wide receiver Cameron Lewis, who finished the regular season with over 1,300 yards receiving and 10 touchdowns. How this team handles the pressure created on the edge from Villanova linebacker Austin Calitro and defensive end Tano Passignon will go a long way in determining the outcome in this one.
Well, the FCS creates so many opportunities for young men. And it's, I think, and you look in our league, it's really the best. It's the best combination of winning football, but also outstanding student athletes. That's really the true model here. And a lot of the FCS programs feel the same way. And, we're blessed to be where we're at here at Lehigh, and everybody else in this league feels the same way. But the FCS, you'll see a lot of people that aren't coming necessarily to the NFL, but what they are is they're becoming leaders of industry, whatever they do when they graduate. And that's really the most important piece of going to college and playing college football, is to getting that degree. and our guys really excel in that response.
Even though we're in the playoffs now in the FCS, we still will take a look at some of the top pro prospects this week that you want to keep an eye on in our 5th down draft outlook.
Starting with linebacker Chris Santini of Cal Poly. They play San Diego this weekend, 6'1", 230. He's a guy that does a great job on both ends of defense. I know I say that a lot, but he absolutely excels in the passing game and also stopping and running. He's going to have a huge game versus the running game Jonah Hodges of San Diego. You also look at Brad Seaton, the offensive tackle at Villanova. I'll be at the Villanova St. Francis game this weekend, and he's a tremendous talent, the left tackle at 6'7", 310. I know Tana Passanio gets all of the praise and all the hype, well-deserved, but when you look at Seaton and what he has done along that very good offensive line, he definitely stands out. And Cameron Young of Weber State, they face a very tough test against Chattanooga, and if he can have a great game versus Keonta Davis, the very talented pass rusher for the Mocs, I think is going to raise his stock a little bit in the eyes of NFL personnel decision makers and what he can do from a tackle standpoint, but he can also kick down inside and play guard at the next level. Don't forget to check out and grab your copy of our 2 newly released books, Football, A Love Story, and What Did Football Teach Me? These books feature over 100 stories from current and former coaches, players, executives, and entertainers from across the football landscape, describing what got them involved in the game, what they love about it, and what life lessons the game taught them. You can find your copy or order your copy from our website at footballgameplan.com/books.
Well, I think the FCS is really, when you look at it, it's the perfect model for football. Okay, in that as a coach, number one, you deal with Division I, it's great. You deal with a high level of athlete. In our case, you deal with a high level of student. It's extremely competitive football. It's a great environment, but it's also doesn't have some of the trappings that the bigger levels have as far as the business and the money of things. But it's pure football. And as a coach, that's what I like is it's about the football. And I think the way we determine our champion is the best playoff system in all of sports. And I think that you can never argue with who the national champion is at the FCS level. And it's just top to bottom the most competitive bracket of playoff sports there is in any of the sports. So if you like the action, I think the quality of play is extremely high. I think the quality of person is extremely high. I think there's some great coaches at our level, and it's attainable to fans too. It's also you come to an FCS game, you have a little bit more of a close experience to the players. And in our case, the players meet the people in the town. It's right there. They're not kind of like these pros in waiting. You can reach out, you can touch them, you can meet the coaches, you can do that stuff. It's just enjoyable football at a real high level still.
For the Patriot League, I'm Chris Victel. The regular season has unfortunately come to an end, but on the bright side, that means it's time for some NCAA FCS playoff football. The Fordham Rams will be disappointed in not getting into the tournament, even though they had an 8-3 record and they have the #1 running back in the country. The Rams defeated Bucknell 36-22 to finish 5-1 in the conference, and that looked like it would be enough for them to sneak in to one of the at-large bids. The Rams would be especially upset to see Illinois State get in as an at-large at 6-5, but it gets even worse to see 4 other teams get in at 7-4 ahead of them, including Cal Poly, Weber State, Samford, and New Hampshire. It was a fantastic season for Fordham, and they will have a lot of their team returning next year, including star quarterback Kevin Anderson and All-American running back Chase Edmonds. Last week, Lehigh defeated Lafayette 45-21 for their 9th straight win, and they're peaking at the right time going into the NCAA tournament. After winning the Patriot League with a week to spare, the Mountain Hawks thought they were a shoo-in for a home playoff game, but instead, the committee gave at-large New Hampshire the home game. This ruffles a lot of feathers in the Patriot League, as now 2 teams feel like they're being treated unfairly. Lehigh will make no excuses though, and they will travel along the identical path that conference foe Colgate faced last year. In the 2015 playoffs, Colgate defeated New Hampshire on the road in the first round, and then went on to beat James Madison on the road in the second round to reach the quarterfinals.
This year, the winner of this game will have the opportunity to face James Madison on the road in that same round of 16 game and have the opportunity to make a big step for their program in the national spotlight. On November 26th, the Mountain Hawks will head to face the New Hampshire Wildcats to begin on their playoff path, looking for the best season in school history. The game will be shown on ESPN3 with all the FCS playoff games, which is a nice way for these players to get extended television exposure. Lehigh will have some extra incentive going into this game, knowing their fans should be watching them play at Goodman Stadium one last time, but the extra fire might be necessary to compete in the tough weeks of FCS playoff football. Holy Cross played New Hampshire very competitively earlier in the season, and Lehigh head coach Andy Cohen says he thinks his guys will be up for the challenge. He also added, quote, "Things change over time, but we have an idea of what they like to do and how they like to do it," close quote. Although those two teams have met 15 times over the years, the last meeting was a big win for New Hampshire back in 2014. I believe this playoff matchup will come down to the fourth quarter. Lehigh has the better squad and the 9-game winning streak, but New Hampshire has the home field advantage, and they will do everything they can to make it a hostile environment for the Mountain Hawks. I believe the current win streak and the momentum that Lehigh has will propel them to great things in this game, and I think the arm of Nick Shafniski will lead them to victory and a matchup next week against number 4 James Madison down in Virginia. With your Patriot League coverage, I'm Chris Victel.
I think FCS presents such a great opportunity, at a school like Fordham and the rest of the Patriot League schools to get the best of both worlds. You're talking about, some of the top 60 academic institutions in the country. Combine that with, full scholarship Division I football that's able to compete on a national level. I think, from a recruiting standpoint and talking to other coaches, that's what we're identifying. We're identifying guys that academics and football are equally important. Not one more than the other, but truly equally important. I think that's the strength of FCS football, certainly in the Patriot League.
All right, it's time to break down each playoff matchup this week, and we'll start in what I like to call the Dakota bracket with the rematch between Cal Poly and San Diego.
In rematch games, it's always about the adjustments. What have you learned from the first meeting? For San Diego, they must learn that in order to beat an option team, you have to win on first down defensively. That killed the Toreros in the first matchup as it led to more manageable third down opportunities. And when they decided to sell out completely, they were beat over top with that Mustangs passing game. Now for Cal Poly, their lesson has to come from what tight end Ross Dwelly did to them in that first go around. Dwelly was deadly over the middle of the field, and the Mustangs have to be sure to keep him in check if they want to be successful. Now, San Diego did have a lead in that first matchup between the two, so obviously they can compete with Cal Poly, but I do think the Mustang defense will once again be the story in this one and lead them to victory. St. Francis travels across the state to take on the Villanova Wildcats, and this one will come down to matchups. How well can the Red Flash match up in the trenches, and can they be successful on a consistent basis? And can Villanova's top cover corner Malik Reeves match up against wide receiver Cameron Lewis of St. Francis? Those are the two biggest matchups in this ball game, and if the Red Flash can make this a Zach Dreyer versus Zach Bednarzik football game, I think they definitely like their chances. Unfortunately, I see the Wildcats being able to do well along the line of scrimmage on both sides, which will allow them to slowly suffocate St. Francis's offense while being able to take the air out of the football when they have it on offense themselves. I like Villanova. The Wildcats of Weber State travel across the country to lovely Chattanooga, Tennessee to take on the Mocs, and Weber State will have to be able to sustain drives if they want to be successful. There will be some opportunities for them to attack this Mocs secondary vertically, but the question will be if their offensive line can give Jadrian Clark time to find guys downfield. Now, Weber State's style is similar to Sanford and their ability to spread you out defensively, and that definitely does something to weaken your ability to pressure them. Now, no one talks about how tough Chattanooga has been in the trenches on offense. Their offensive line didn't allow a sack last week versus Alabama. The key is getting rid of the football quickly, and quarterback Alejandro Benefield has done a magnificent job all season long. What we'll see in this ball game is a mock squad that'll be able to pin their ears back and get after the clock. I don't trust the Wildcats' ability to run the football, and you won't beat Chattanooga with a one-dimensional offense unless, obviously, you run the option. Lehigh takes their explosive offense on the road north to New Hampshire and take on the Wildcats, and I think the bigger story of the season has been the turnaround of the Mountain Hawks defense. Over the last month, they've been much more active and opportunistic on that side of the ball, and we know their offense will come ready to play and won't have an off day no matter who they face on the other side. But if their defense can't keep this thing going, this is what will make them scary moving forward. And kudos to New Hampshire for making their 13th straight playoff appearance under head coach Sean McDonald. And while this team isn't as dominant as it has been over the years, there's something about playoff football that gets the Wildcats right on track. Now, I worry about their offense in this game, more in particular their passing game. Not because they can't throw, but because Lehigh matches up very well in the back seven. I like the Mountain Hawks in this ball game. This Lehigh team is really good, and they'll get that statement win this weekend in Durham, New Hampshire. Birds find themselves down south as they take on Central Arkansas. This will be a huge test for Redbirds offense that will have to play great along the line of scrimmage in order to have a shot. Teams that have been able to generate pressure have given Illinois State problems all season long, and defensively, Central Arkansas is excellent at resetting the line of scrimmage and forcing opponents to consistently make plays in space. For the Bears in this ballgame, I like how well balanced they are offensively. Quarterback Hayden Hillebrand has done a great job being efficient and getting multiple options involved in the passing game. This one will be won by the Bears defense. You'll see them be able to take Anthony Warren completely away in the passing game for Kolb and force him to go to other targets, and their defensive line will give Illinois State fits throughout this ball game. What a battle this game will be between North Carolina A&T and Richmond. There are a ton of storylines here surrounding the quarterback position for both teams. For A&T, will Lamar Reynard return to the lineup after missing last week, or will it be Olufewame Bamiro again at the helm calling the plays? And while he didn't play terribly or bad last week versus North Carolina Central, it was a clear difference between he and Renard. Now for Richmond, without Kyle Loletta, will this offense be a little bit different? Will it look different than what we've seen all season long? So excluding the quarterback position, if we break this game down further, you'll see that one of the bigger questions for Richmond is stopping the run. And in comes Tariq Cohen, one of the more dynamic backs in college football, regardless of division, who averages over 150 yards rushing per game. Now, Richmond is highly suspect on the edges defensively in the run defense department, and I think overall, without the ability to sustain drives, they'll be on the field a lot and will get tired as the game progresses. I like North Carolina A&T in this ball game. The Aggies boast one of the best defenses against the run and also on third down. Also, they have the best defensive front in the MEAC, so look for an exciting game with the Aggies pulling off the stunner in Richmond. I like this matchup between Samford and Youngstown State. This is a strength versus strength battle as you have the explosive Bulldogs offense against the stout defense of the Penguins. You can even narrow it down to the specific matchups of Samford wide receivers led by Carell Hamilton versus the Penguins secondary led by cornerback Kenny Bishop. The biggest challenge in this game will be Youngstown State's offense. They've run the ball extremely well all season long. Can they function if their run game gets slowed down? That'll be the question they'll have to answer early in this contest. I like Samford in this ballgame. The Bulldogs offense is good enough to overcome early stops by this very tough Penguins defense. I don't think Youngstown State will be able to dictate in the trenches against this Bulldogs defensive line. They'll force the Penguins to make plays in the passing game, which could prove problematic. We have a good option football battle here between Charleston Southern and Wofford. Now, the Bucks defense has been a great complement to what they do offensively, and I'm a big fan of how well they swarm to the football. It's a great team defensive philosophy that they put forth on game day, and Wofford's fullback Lorenzo Long is as consistent as they come. He has rushed for over 1,100 yards and 14 touchdowns this season. He's a threat to score every time he touches the football. The familiarity with both schemes should definitely make for a close game, but the difference will be the Charleston Southern in their ability to throw the football with efficiency and effectiveness. And in my opinion, all things being equal, you have to side with the Bucks in this ball game. The passing game and their defense will give them a slight edge over Wofford.
So that's it for this week's episode of the FCS Kickoff presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, and be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts. And don't forget to check out and subscribe on iTunes to our FCS Opening Drive podcast.